Ringo Starr, 2012.
Oh, I remember George was interested in this cheese that he'd found. It was called Limburger. Yeah, I'd heard of Limburger. I'd heard that it smelled bad, but I'd never been around it at all. And when George brought it into Abbey Road Studios one day, he was going to have it for dinner. He's going to have cheese and crackers for dinner. And as soon as he walked in the door, we all stopped what we were doing. I was tinkering with me kit, and it felt like me bullocks just squinched up when he walked in the room, and I could smell something. Of course, I didn't know anything about the cheese.
George Harrison, 1974.
Oh yes, and they were all looking at me as I walked in the room. And I was aware that Limburger cheese smelled bad, but I wasn't aware that it would pollute an entire building. Well, I walked into that session that day at Abbey Road with the Limburger, and John had been playing with some voodoo doll or something that he'd acquired in the Bahamas, and he dropped it, and Paul was drinking a beer, and he spit it out, and Ringo just started fidgeting with his bullocks, and I didn't make the connection. I just noticed that they reacted terribly to me as soon as I walked through the door.
Paul McCartney, 1981.
Oh yeah, I remember the incident with the cheese, with George and the cheese. Oh, cool. You never smelled anything like it. When he walked through the door, it was bad enough, but when he opened it a few hours later. Now, it had been sitting in this plastic container at room temperature for 2 hours. Well, when I could pass out just remembering what it smelled like. When he opened it, we just started going insane. And John just ran out of the building, just put down his guitar, didn't even grab his cigarettes, I remember. Because I saw John was leaving. I wanted to see if he was going to grab his cigarettes. He didn't bring any cigarettes. He just went out of the building and stood on the sidewalk and started giving autographs. And then we all followed him. Ringo and I went out on the front, and then the strangest thing, only with the Beatles would this happen, the strangest thing happened. George came out with his cheese and crackers and started stinking up the whole fucking street.
John Lennon, 1980.
Oh, well, there's one thing we don't talk about a lot. You know, it might have been mentioned a few times, but there's this incident with George. George had this cheese, this dreadful Limburger cheese that he brought in off the street. It smelled like you couldn't breathe when it was around you. It was dreadful. It was pungent. It was putrid. It was absolutely dreadful to smell this cheese. And when he opened that tin or whatever it was that it was in, I ran out of the building. I think I hurt my guitar. I still have that guitar, and it still does a funny thing on the E string, the high E. Bottom string, it has a twinkle. You know, it has a twinkle. It wasn't there before. You know when you get those twinkles.
Ringo Starr, 1981.
Well, you know, I said, George. I pulled him aside, you know, I wanted to talk to him. I pulled him aside and said, George, you know, you're my buddy. You're my brother. I love you. I've always loved you. You know, I'd do anything for you, but I said, George, you can't be bringing that stinky... It smelled like a corpse. I thought he was eating a dead human body that had been laid out on the street for 5 days. I mean, it smelled rancid. And he said, you have to try it. I said, I'm not going to try it.
George Harrison, 1983.
And I said, Ringo, you've got to try this cheese. Because they'd all been making fun of me and running away from me and doing all these shenanigans. And I said, Ringo, you have to try the cheese. He says, no. You know how Ringo talks, very low register. He's got a low voice. He says, no. Excuse me, I've got some saliva. I'm also choking a little bit. Excuse me. Sometimes I just laugh at random. And I'm sorry, I'm having an episode. Oh, sorry. It happens sometimes. I just... It's this medicine they've got me on for me poops. So I don't poop so much. They give me this medicine. It makes me goofy. It makes me all wonky. I start laughing, and I'm just trying to tell you a simple story. Anyway, so Ringo... You know how Ringo talks in a low register. He says, I don't want to try the cheese. Or however he talks, something like that. I said, Ringo, if you try it, then John will try it. And if John tries it, Paul will try it. So, took me about 3 hours to convince him to try the damn cheese. And when he did, he loved it.
Ringo Starr, 1985.
Oh, yeah, that thing with the cheese? Well, I ended up tasting it. It was good. It was good. We all had some. Because I had some, John had some, because he knew I would never eat anything nasty. John always would eat. If I ate it, John would eat it. And Paul, he was even pickier. If John would eat it, Paul would eat it. So they had some cheese. And so we went through our Limburger stage there for a while, and Abbey Road smelled like an abattoir. It smelled awful. And they did things like that in those days.